If you, as you are right now, were transported into Super Mario 64, do you think you could beat it? Do you think you could even complete, say, Whomps Fortress? That is what we'll be taking a look at today. Now, last time we were able to get 3 stars in Bob-omb Battlefield. Our methods were pretty interesting and they will be relevant here, so if you haven't watched the first episode, I would recommend it, though it's not strictly necessary. I'm going to assume that you have watched that episode. As with last episode, we will have the same stats that we had going into Bob-omb Battlefield, but we'll be braving the dangers of Whomps Fortress. And what dangers exactly does that possess? There's the whole getting crushed by many different things, falling off into a void, which probably doesn't feel particularly good. Interestingly enough, I suppose those really are the only 2 dangers here, just getting crushed and falling. You know, Bob-omb Battlefield had a lot more varied dangers. We had to worry about explosions, we had to do math. If you get crushed by a thwomp or a whomp, they're both here, you're probably just dead. You know, they hit the ground, and even when we see Mario, you know, getting crushed, he goes all the way, he is flat. It's a flat boy, and that would make you a dead boy. Taking a look at the first star, getting up to the actual battle itself isn't really all that bad, with a bit of patience sneaking around the piranha plants. You know, probably take a chunk out of you, so you're going to want to avoid them. We could probably make it up to the top and could feasibly defeat a whomp if we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and that we could just, you know, hit him with do one of those, you know, do some wrestling moves on him or something. It seems like just the body weight kind of on their weakness spot is enough to crack them, so feasibly we could do it too. We weigh more than Mario, but we can't jump as high. We could also do it more than once, but then again, with that, you know, would be pretty rough on our body, so we have to be very careful how we did that. I'm assuming that the standard ground pound, actually, fun fact, when I was younger, I used to do quote-unquote ground pounds. I would just jump up in the air and then land on my butt. And, you know, I think that's why I have spine problems. Not the greatest idea, but, you know, feasibly you could do it, and if you just go get a 1-up or whatever, or jump off the side of the map, you know, these injuries are taken care of. You don't really have to worry about chronic injuries in this situation, at least. And under this logic, we could reasonably obtain our 4th star. Up next, we have the top of the tower. This one's a bit more tricky, as we can't quite make the jump to the bottom-most platform here. So we need to find something to bring up here to make this a little bit easier on it. And there are a couple ways that we could do that. Depending on what kind of wood this little wooden board bridge is, we might be able to drag it up. However, some of the calculations that I was coming up with on the actual weight of this plank, see the calculations on screen and see why dragging it may not necessarily be an option. However, if it were a very light kind of wood, it would only be a couple 100 pounds, so you could probably drag it. We do have food and water here. Assuming that the piranha plants are based off of, what is that? Hydnorna Africa? Look at this thing and tell me that this does not look like a piranha plant. I know people are always like, oh, but Newbornkilik, the piranha plants are based off of Venus flytraps. No, that is not. No. This is a Venus flytrap. This is one of those hell plants, okay? That, I don't like them at all. They are edible and they're even non-toxic. So feasibly you would have food and water in this area, so you could have this board project, you know, moving this board around for quite some time, assuming you could just survive on, you know, these plants and maybe boiling the water with, say, like a hollowed out Koopa shell or something over a fire. You can even make yourself, you know, some plant soup. Doesn't sound very good, but it's got all the water and nutrients you need. Maybe. With all of that said, I don't really think this is a feasible way to get the star up at the top, and we only need just a little bit of extra height to grab onto the first platform, and from there on we can actually just make the rest of the jumps really no problem. It'd be a little bit spooky and require some timing, but we could probably manage it as long as we can make it to that first platform. And the way that I think we could do this would likely be either using one of the weird cork boxes down at the bottom and carrying them up very, very patiently and slowly. Again, we could take our time with this because we have a food and water source. However, if we were feeling a little bit more risky, we also have the option to take the giant board that is just precariously, I don't know who put this there, but they need to be fired. This thing should be relatively easy to knock down, and we could kind of wiggle it a little bit and knock it towards the tower. And then if we fail, we just restart the level and it sets itself back up. Ideally, we would be able to get the star that way, But there will be a little detail later that we'll be able to get this star regardless, but I'll get to that at the end. I don't want to spoil the rest of the theory crafting, giving us our 5th star total. Next we have Shoot to the Wild Blue, and the interesting part about this is pretty much the tower star, but a little bit easier. We probably wouldn't be able to use the cannon, as we kind of talked about last time. There are a lot of questions of whether or not the cannon would actually be reasonable to use, but as it turns out, we wouldn't need that anyway, as we could just use this board. Even if it is a little bit heavier, the trip is a lot less intensive. It would be a lot of work, but I think you could probably get this propped up. And, oh, Ash is here. Well, hello. Ash hates closed doors, so he just barges through them. You could probably get this propped up, maybe just barely. Again, you could be on this project for a little bit. I think you could probably manage it. It would be tricky and very exhausting, but you could get this star. But again, not gonna matter once I give you the little tip a little bit later on. And this gives us access to our 6th star, doubling our star count, and we're only 3 stars in. Up next, we have the red coin star. And this is going to be a very, very important star, and I'll get to why later. Just know that it's going to be very important. Essentially, there isn't really much stopping us. I think the trickiest part would either be getting the coin on the thwomp, which you would just have to be careful with. You could probably make that jump, or maybe grab the cork box and kind of put it there along the side of the thwomp, so you could climb up on the cork box and then, make the climb up to the thwomp. From there, you could probably just grab the red coin. The other one that I think would be kind of tricky would be the red coin over the slanted platform underneath the rotating platform. Just getting there without actually taking any damage or any sort of injuries would be a bit tricky, but you could probably just crawl up there and grab it. Overall, there isn't too much that's going to stop you from grabbing the red coin star as well. The star Fall into the Caged Island at first glance seems very difficult, if not completely impossible, and I was ready to write this one up as being such, as just being completely impossible. However, I took a closer look at the owl's dialogue, and he actually seems pretty willing to help. I mean, yeah, there's the whole thing where he's annoyed that we woke him up. Then he kind of immediately changes tune and says, like, I'll take you wherever you want to go. So feasibly, you could just talk to the owl and say, hey, can you just drop me off here instead of having to do this large, drop into the cage? Interestingly enough, how I said the red coin star was going to be important for later, this owl shows up on the red coin star. After fighting the Whomp at the top, you could get the red coin star, as you'd have access to the board bridge to get over to the floating islands. And at that point, you'd be able to then select the red coin star and use the owl, as the owl is there from stars 3 through 6. And this means that we could use the owl to get every single star except for the first one and the 6th one. Now this includes the 100 coin star as well. Going back to Fall into the Caged Island, if you don't want to use the owl, there is the tiniest little spot that you could shoot through the cannon, not hit the wall, and not hit the cage either, but just grab the star. People have talked in the comments, there was actually a couple comments that I got, using the stars to our advantage, and I'm not really sure how that would work. For example, would we be able to get a star over an abyss and that would teleport us back? Are the stars this sort of thing that, we have access to until we give its power back to the castle? Could we theoretically use a power star, much like in the earlier Mario games, to become invincible and destroy everything in our path? And then it begs the question, if we used a power star in that way, would it be drained and would we be able to return it to the castle? Just because the Mario of this world doesn't do it, doesn't mean it's not possible. But I'm going to assume that as soon as we grab a star, we're probably whisked away, so we wouldn't be able to use the stars. I know, big bummer. Honestly, that was a galaxy brain idea, but for the sake of simplicity, we're not gonna get that complicated with it. He says, as the first episode was incredibly complicated. Up next, we have a choice to make. Will we be the paragon of good or the harbinger of evil? As you see, we have a moral choice to make in the final star Blast Away the Wall. And that is, how do we get this wall open? There's only 2 things that can go in a cannon, and one of them is Mario. And I would wager that, shooting yourself or shooting a human out of a cannon into a brick wall is probably a pretty quick way to go meet Jesus, and not recommended. If only we had some other kind of ammunition that we could use in a cannon. Maybe something explosive. Maybe something spherical. Maybe something pink? Push him into the cannon and shoot him into the wall. Okay, I'm not thinking that there's any other way that we're gonna be able to get this star, and Princess Peach ain't gonna save herself. Besides, as soon as we re-enter the painting and reload the level, he'll be back anyway. Right? Well, yeah, that's how it works. All the enemies and everything respawn, so yeah, he'll be back. This would bring our star count up to 9, and if we count the 100 coin star, again, we could just use the owl to drop us off wherever we want in the level. Just because Mario's not talking to the owl saying, hey, can you let me down gently? You know, we'll go for a fly, but I also don't like, spine damage. Doesn't mean that we can't, try to reason with him. We could even say, hey, I'll give you some of my delicious piranha plant soup. Actually, maybe don't offer him that. He might be offended. Alternately, if there is a day-night cycle, you could just go there in the night when the owl would be a little more, reasonable. I actually don't know if there would be a day-night cycle in this. I would assume there's not. I don't know. That's an interesting question. We'll have to figure that one out. Anyway, with that in mind, we have collected 10 stars total. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. Does that mean an awful lot? If you have any ideas on how you would complete any of these stars, please do let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much to my patrons, channel members, and Twitch supporters. I'm Newbornkilik, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out.